probably all know what I mean when I say, wow, imposter syndrome feeling. And I must admit, I'm feeling sort of like seeing so many of you there, and the fact that a vendor wanted to sponsor this session is quite wow. Okay, so just a little bit before we get going, if I can get it, there we go. Cardinia Libraries. This is a photo of one of our staff with all of the home deliveries and click and collects that we accumulated during COVID-19. We actually sent out, I think it was the equivalent of 18 hippos worth of parcels over the year and a half. We got to, do it hippos and dinosaurs and everything else to make it a bit more interesting, in a COVID-safe way, of course. So Cardinia Libraries, and this is a picture of our beautiful Bunjil Place Library, which is now 4 years old. We are a cooperative service between the City of Casey and Cardinia Shire in the outer southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. We serve a population of about 450,000 currently and expect to top over 500,000 by 2049. We are a member of the Libraries Victoria Consortium, which is coming up to now 26 public library services in Victoria working on the same library system. There's another additional 4 that are on the system, but the other 26 share our memberships and our items. Saves a lot in interlibrary loan costs. We have 7 branches ranging from including 3 large, 2 medium, 2 small, and the busiest mobile library service in Victoria. And as I said, our population is over 450,000, and the City of Casey, which is our biggest council, expects to reach 550,000 by 2041. So massive growth area. For those of you in Victoria, I know this is traumatic. I'll try and make it as brief as possible. But we have had 6 lockdowns in Melbourne. The longest was in 2020, which was from March to June, and then July to November, with the other 4 in 2021, including August to November, which really mucked up people's holiday planning, weddings, birthdays, you name it. Our libraries were closed for over 330 days, and for the majority of that time, only a very small cohort of staff were allowed on site to manage home delivery and then click and collect. Most of our 160 plus staff had to work from home, which was very difficult when you realise the majority had customer-facing roles. So, we still managed to roll out tech projects, and much as it might sound exciting, what some of these projects are, the projects themselves are only peripheral to what I'm actually talking about. I'm talking about how we managed to roll them out when everybody was working from home. So some of the projects that we did roll out during these lockdowns was digital payroll forms, which was moving all of our HR forms into Microsoft's digital apps. Staff were encouraged to download the app, but for those who didn't want to or didn't have a mobile device, and yes, there are some people out there who still don't have mobile devices, they could access it via a browser. And we made a link on our intranet so they could easily access it. We had created a member relationship manager, which was a developed module in our WordPress website, which integrates with our library management system, our events bookings, our deliveries and click and collects module, and brought them all together under one login on the library website. So a member could log in, they could see their loans, renew their items, check their holds, change their holds, suspend whatever else, which is usually LMS processes. They could also see what events they'd booked into, cancel those. They could also see the progress of their click and collect or home deliveries, all through the one portal. We finally rolled out mobile printing, which is really hard to do when you don't have people in your libraries to actually test it out. But we did it. And we also introduced a new VoIP phone system, which rolled out new handsets and web-based phone answering using Ring Central, which in the end was very fast and very vital because that's how we were answering our phones from home. So how do we do it? Well, in the old days, you would meet in person, discuss the new technology. You would be a spate of emails followed by more meetings. Then there would be direct access in person for testing and practice. And then we would have in-person training in small groups, possibly in a classroom setup, and then more practice in person whilst off desk, and then on the job with practical use. That's the old way. The new way, all staff had a device. We were very fortunate that in the year preceding we had bought 10 laptops for each of our 7 branches. So we had 70 devices that were being used for code clubs and other programs that suddenly got repurposed for the staff who either didn't have a work device or didn't have one of their own that they could use from home. So everybody had a device. We still had a few staff where they didn't have an internet connection, which made life interesting, and we usually adjusted to make sure that they were the ones who could come into the library and do the work of organising home deliveries. We did all of our meetings online via Teams, which we had also moved to. For those of you who were at the last VALA conference, I presented a paper on how we'd shifted our workforce from to mobile. So all of our senior management team, our department heads have all got laptops and phones. We don't have desks, and we haven't had since the start of 2019. So we were all ready for this. It was really our staff who worked in branches that needed the extra assist to get this over the line. So we had our online Teams meetings, which at least we were a bit familiar with to start with. We did testing and feedback through specially created teams. So for those who are familiar with Teams, you'd normally set up teams around maybe a department or a branch. We then created special teams. So we had a special team around the HR forms. And that team involved people who were interested in helping to test that. So we used the Teams chats. We rolled out training on Litmos, which is our online training platform. We sent out updates and news were channelled through our library intranet. And then we used major announcements and engagement with the executive team using Microsoft Live Events, which after Jerry spoke, we might need to change back to Zoom. Okay, so Microsoft Teams, most of you know what it is, but it's like a discovery layer setup where it's sort of like a platform sitting on top of SharePoint, gives you access to your files, gives you chats, gives you meetings, all of that sort of engagement. So we used Teams for the scope setting, development, testing and preparation for rollout. We set up new teams around projects so that staff could have conversations, get information about testing, give feedback on changes needed. So, for example, our digital apps. The app was prepared, the staff got involved in the chat saying, this is working, this is not working, what about this? This is all done remotely, all working from home. The ICT team was able to take those things away, get back on chat saying, yep, we've done that change, can you test it again? They could see the back end of where those forms were coming through to make sure that everything was working properly. So the entire testing, development, rollout of our digital apps happened remotely, all online. And that is the one thing of all the technology projects that we rolled out that staff love, absolutely adore. Instead of having to find a paper form and then find a manager who can sign the paper form, it's all done online. It automatically gets sent to their manager who approves it, and then it gets sent to payroll. So staff adore it. Branch and department teams were having regular catch-ups, and the ICT and Information Services team members attended these as well to gather and share information on the upcoming projects and to gather feedback from the staff in those branches and meetings. Staff set up notifications on Teams so they wouldn't miss out on anything. We were also able to invite people outside the organisation to participate in these chats and meetings. And for those of you in public libraries, you'd know Micah, who used to be at Eastern Regional. He was instrumental in helping us to develop the member relationship manager, and he was quite often invited into those meetings. Our staff intranet is built on SharePoint. It has become the central repository, as it should, of our news and promotion materials. All intranet posts are emailed to staff so that they are aware, and we get feedback enough to know that a significant number of staff are reading them. Unfortunately, not always enough when you get somebody who says, Michelle, you need to do this. I go, no, we changed that 3 years ago and we've sent reminders out 5 times, but that's another thing. New policies and procedures were also kept here in a space that staff are now familiar with. And the reference section is our space for additional training that was not or could not be added to Litmos, which is our online training platform. It also includes links to other training sites and things like Friday Freshers and afternoon updates, which were special training sessions that we ran staff over the lockdown periods. So Litmos is an online learning management system. It's web-based single sign-on, so that was set up so that if our staff were already logged into Microsoft Teams or SharePoint, that they could just log straight in through to Litmos. It was linked from our intranet, so they didn't have to remember what the URL was, and we did a lot of training over lockdown. For most of our staff, if they weren't on the phone answering queries, they were usually on training on Litmos. So we rolled out a lot of modules really, really quickly, but Litmos comes with thousands and thousands of pre-installed training modules, including ones that we needed for compliance training, such as Victorian Child Safe Standards, workplace bullying, anti-discrimination, and made it so much easier that we didn't have to create absolute everything for our staff to complete. All the additional training content that we developed was developed by my team, the Information Services team, in conjunction with the ICT team, and was tested by us first. So one or two of us would create the content. The rest of the team wasn't necessarily aware of what was being created or what had been done, so they were our wonderful guinea pigs for testing the training, and once it got past them and the ICT team, we rolled it out to staff. Managers were also given access to their team so they can monitor what staff were doing, because it's really hard to know what your staff are doing when they're not in the same building as you. And they could then direct them to complete particular training modules, which was important in this training rollout, especially as we got closer to getting staff back in library. We need to know that our staff had completed the training for all the new tech that they were going to hit when they got back in branch. Now, Microsoft Live Events I love, but a little less after Jerry. It has the web functionality of Teams, but it's an additional licence required. So if you don't know about Microsoft Live Events, it's basically a Zoom webinar, but within Teams. We send an invitation to all of our staff. The resulting content of the live event is recorded and loaded onto the intranet for viewing for those who couldn't attend, which as we got more out of lockdown was more and more people. It's been used for tech rollouts, but also for Live with the CEO events to update staff. We've had great attendance over lockdowns, but we're able to have most staff attending most of these sessions. It was just good for keeping people in touch with not only their own teams, but the managers of the library. We don't see as much of our senior managers since the upper cohort of managers have been working remotely, so being able to see, oh yeah, this person still does exist, and they're talking to us. We are able to take questions and answers and feedback from these as well, and as I said, recordings are made available afterwards. Now, this is what it looks like, just for those who've never seen it. This is from the back end. You might actually see the pictures move because this is a video, but it doesn't move much, so I'm not worried if it's not playing. So just in brief, up the top you can see we've got 18 attendees and then we've gone live. So what you do is anybody who's in the session is at the bottom, including me with Miffy in the background. And you get to assign roles when you set up the session. So I was assigned as a producer. I'm one of the 4 staff who've got the producer credentials to set these up and run these sessions. And what I do is control who's going to be on the camera, and I also get to see and control what's happening with the Q&A. So we tend to try and have 2 of our staff in there so somebody can control the camera, somebody can be monitoring the Q&A. So what happens is you put somebody into the left-hand box, and when you're ready to go, you chuck them in the right-hand box. And then to start the session where the red button is now, it would say start, and that would actually start streaming the live session out to attendees. They can come in at any time before the session starts, but they'll just see, a sign saying that this is going to start soon. So it's pretty straightforward. The biggest problem was it takes about 5 or 6 seconds for a video to get from the left-hand side to the right-hand side and go live. And it's amazing how many times the person who's speaking will say, I'll hand over to so-and-so, and so you put them over. But before I do, so I felt like sometimes I was going to cause issues with the changing pictures of people, and sometimes they were talking for 5 or 10 seconds before the face of the person actually appeared on the screen. So that's what it looks like. And it was, we're still using it today, but I'll talk a bit more about that shortly. Okay, so what were our challenges? Of course, one of our challenges was the remote access. We managed to get devices to everyone, but not everyone had internet or even decent internet. So we had a lot of issues where turn off the camera, including myself, and I had a decent internet, but I also had 4 people at home trying to access it. So some allowances were made. For example, we allowed staff to turn their camera off in meetings, but only once they had shown that they were actually there. Just so we could say, yes, we can see you are there, and if you're having internet issues, yes, you can turn your camera off. For those who did have internet issues or had no connectivity, we tried to ensure that those were the people who are working in the libraries for the click and collect, click and collect the home deliveries, answering phones when it couldn't be picked up remotely, that sort of thing. We needed to get staff to use Teams, get used to Teams. When we first introduced it, because most of our staff don't have their own devices, they didn't use it all that much. Probably the most common thing they used Teams for before lockdowns was the daily roster. The desk roster was in Teams. All of a sudden, they have had to start using Teams, but some of us had been using it for a year and a half, and so we were already really, really familiar. So we already had the training, thank goodness, we'd done that early. So we just reminded them, go do the training, and we ended up rolling out a couple more training modules just to say, okay, now you've got the basics, here's the more advanced stuff related to Teams. So we did that through our Litmos training modules and then hands-on with Teams. We expected every staff member to log into Teams, and in fact, on the sly, we had a staff member who was working from home but didn't seem to be checking in, so we made it a requirement for them to have their Teams open, so at least we knew that that actually started work. Couldn't guarantee that stayed in work, but at least that started work. All of our meetings and catch-ups were there, but we couldn't keep staff doing training all day, every day, so we had to find other ways to engage them, including, apart from testing the new technology, we had database cleanups. Our membership database has never looked so good. We also had a project, as a few public libraries did, of calling our older patrons, so people who may have been home alone, isolated, not realising that we had this service that we could provide to them of sending them out materials, and that was very, very well appreciated. We started planning for future events, and our youth team in particular, who provide all of our children's services, loved having the time to get really creative with their online events for kids. I've got a children's librarian down the front here nodding. We started planning for future events. We moved a lot of online events to online, and in fact we still are running a lot of our local history events online because that really seemed to engage with that particular cohort of event attendees. We had the remote phone answering, chat queries, book lists, and we finally gave our staff permission to do book reviews in work hours. That went down very well. It was great to learn about new technology remotely, but it was quite some time before we got hands-on. So much of the learning was lost. As we all know, unless you get lots of practice with using stuff, it can be easy. And as the lockdown stretched out or got repeated, it was difficult. So staff learned again, basically back on the job, but we also ran short refresher training sessions for them. Staff, as we all know, library staff are fantastic, and they were great at supporting each other and using Teams messages to ask questions. And that's been one of the big benefits of this whole process was, for myself, that I don't have a branch, I'm in a lot of meetings, I take a lot of phone calls, but, and this applies to a lot of our managers, there's a really good chance if you want a quick answer that if you send a Teams message, you're going to get that over any other form of contact. So staff are now well aware of that and will use that, and I've probably answered about 16 team queries while I've been here this week. But there's been also training exhaustion. There was so much to do and people wanted to be doing something else other than training. Fortunately, we started getting staff back at our libraries and doing other tasks. So what we learned is that we're still using these tools for project rollouts. Before the lockdowns, mainly regional support staff were using Teams for communications. Now staff all over are using it, alongside email because of the quicker responses. Videos from our live events and our meetings are still being watched at a higher rate than ever before, despite exhaustion, because staff want to learn, and that's one of our core values, is a love of learning. Staff have taken responsibility for their learning, but still have manager oversight, so it's not a big push to say, we've got this new module out on Litmos, it's been assigned to you, go in and do that. Staff are keen to learn, so they'll take the opportunities, and we've probably had a couple of 100 extra modules that we haven't assigned that our staff have completed on Litmos, our training portal. Refreshers are ongoing, run live as Teams meetings or live events so we can get questions, but always recorded for later viewing. And we will also be doing regular Teams sessions as refreshers on a range of topics. Next one will be on our events portal, which was introduced just before lockdown. They will be live because there is value to having people attend, even if it's only 2, to ask the questions that you as the presenter don't think of. Live is great for getting questions. And now we are doing live events more often because unfortunately we're going through a major change in structure in our library service. So our executive team is using that to keep our staff up to date, and we get maybe 20 or 30 staff actually attending the session, but you have pretty much every staff member will watch it afterwards if they haven't seen it themselves in person. We're still rolling out technology. We're about to roll out a lot of makerspace equipment, which will use all of these tools to roll out. Teams use, as I said, is much increased. Before lockdowns, little used by branch staff, except for the branch roster, but now a regular communication tool, not just from the staff to the senior management, but also between branches and within actual individual teams. We've also created new teams around specific purposes. So we have an environmental voice team, an adult programs team, youth services, occupational health and safety, and more. And staff are often assigned time regularly to complete their Litmos training, specifically at the larger branches, and monitored at the smaller branches with time assigned as required. And Teams is now open on every staff device used every work day. And that's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Michelle.
I forgot something.
Just to remind everyone, if you want to pop your questions through the app, I've got one here from the audience. So what's one of the lessons you want to make sure is not lost as we go back into the offices?
One of the lessons. Okay. That's a really hard question. I'd probably say that and it's probably a lesson that we haven't really learned since before lockdowns, since we moved to office, is the importance of being seen in your libraries, to know that even though you're a manager and maybe don't need to work in a branch because of whatever your setup is, it's really important to connect with your staff, every single one of them. So I try to make it a practice to get into the branches regularly, just to sort of say, hey, I'm here. And the amount of times the staff have said, Michelle, I'm so glad you're here. I've been meaning to ask you. And that's even with all their tools at their fingertips to actually do those sorts of questions. Just having you there face to face is just such an important thing. And we heard Kim talk earlier about social connections. That is still very important even in the workplace.
I guess I could ask you the sort of converse of that. Is there anything that you sort of had to implement, or a way of working during COVID that you couldn't get rid of fast enough, or something that you have now dropped?
This is probably not something that we sort of like expected to happen. Trying to get devices back from staff who enjoy working from home when they've got a customer-facing role and can't. I think we've only just recently, we've had our libraries open full time since November, and we went back to full hours from January. I think we're still waiting for a couple of the laptops to come back because there's staff, some customer-facing staff who are still hopeful that we might let them work from home a bit more often. And I did promise a couple of people that I would mention one thing that I haven't, and I'm thankful to my colleagues down here that they haven't asked this question yet. My husband likes to make the joke that at one stage when we're trying to get all the staff set up and everything else, that I was managing this single-handedly. And he was right in one sense. I'd actually fractured my elbow and I was only using one arm. So single-handedly it was.
And, another question from the audience. Does Litmos have any training strengths?
Litmos is a really, really good platform in that you can have training set up any way you want. So when we uploaded training modules, we did a combination of PowerPoints, quizzes, videos, all that sorts of things. It gives you a variety of ways to include assessments. So you can have a quiz, or you can have, got to check a box or whatever else, or things like that. But it's probably one of its strengths is the ways that training can be imported. So like I said, it's got a lot of training already, but we got a training module from the Autism Association of Australia on autism, And they gave it to us as SCORM files, and that was whiz to actually upload to Litmos. It was nice and easy. So you're not locked into a particular format. It's very flexible in what it'll allow to be uploaded, or it's already got a lot of good content on it already.
You mentioned a bit earlier about using chat, and I'm particularly interested in that as well in the workplace in terms of reducing the amount of volume of emails, but also, you know, some things just require a quick answer and you don't need the formality and the sort of writing out a long form letter. So any thoughts on how we can sort of encourage more using those types of tools rather than just over relying on email?
You can actually use it for more than work communications. Like, we actually use chat for just catching up with each other, just connecting with staff. So it didn't actually always have to be formal communications. So just establishing it as a casual communications tool made it easier for staff to get to know how to use it, so that when the time came, and then the other way is make sure the people who are being asked questions answer them. So there's no point in putting it out to the ether, because chat works very sequentially. So if more stuff is getting put in, unless you've got notifications set up, you're going to miss stuff. So, and needs fast responses. So if you're not going to have a fast response, then maybe email's better.